Hey everyone, welcome. I'm going to be talking about file-based routing today and why it sucks and why you should use it. My name is Lybrand. As mentioned, I do work on the Remix team, developer relations manager, really focused on React Router right now, which if you don't know what React Router is, it's a product from Remix, and if you don't know what Remix is, we're actually a Shopify team, so this should clear everything up. Pause for laughter. So why file-based routing sucks and why you should use it. Why does file-based routing suck? Well, before we talk about why it sucks so much, we should actually talk about why file-based routing in the first place. Why do we actually use file-based routing? Why does Next.js, TanStack Router, Remix, React Router all kind of lean into this file-based routing system? So first, it's easy to demo and get started with. It's easy to build something new. So that's really nice. You can build something really quickly. You just type in a file name, and then you have a route. That's pretty cool, right? You have a simple URL to route mapping, so that's nice. You have this relationship between the two, and so it's really easy to understand how your URL is going to look from your file system. Also, the conventions are already decided and documented. My previous job, our principal engineer really loved anything that other teams had already decided for us so that we didn't have to spend time fighting about how our file-based conventions were going to work and whatnot. But even with all these reasons, we would still get these responses. This is back from June of 2022, before I was even on the Remix team. Someone was basically just saying, hey, I hate this file-based routing. Why is Next.js and Remix, why are they doing this? Why can't we just have a Rails-style declarative routing config file? Foreshadowing. And we responded that this was probably like Ryan or Kent, I'm not sure. But basically, the reason we do this is because you need separate files to do code splitting. You don't want to send your entire bundle, you don't want to send your entire app to the user. You need a code split, and so it's a really easy way to split based on your actual route, because that's what you want to show the user at the time. And so you're already going to be making these extra files, so you might as well start with a file-based routing. And with Remix and React Router specifically, we have all these different exports in your route module. You can export things like loaders and then client loaders that run on the client, your hydrate fallback, which runs before hydration has happened. You have all these different things, and we've even gone so far as to add even more and more code splitting to these. So this is a lot of work that Mark Daglish has been working on our team, of taking all of that route module and splitting up all those little pieces into smaller chunks so you can load stuff in parallel, and before you actually need it, you can start running your loaders as soon as you need to. So we've done a lot of work to make this super optimized for your end user, so you don't even have to think about it. And file-based routing gives us this, this ability very easily. So automatic code splitting is actually, that to me is like kind of the #1 reason, but it's, I put it at #4 because that was the way I told the story. All right, why does file-based routing suck, though? We talked about the reasons, we talked about why we're doing it, yet it still sucks. We still get people over and over again telling us it's so bad. And I did scientific research for this talk to show you all why it sucks. And the scientific research is just getting screenshots of tweets. All right, so you have to learn a convention. This is the #1 reason. That is kind of annoying. So it's nice to have the convention, but you have to learn the convention. So here's Remix v2 routes, and here's kind of Next.js routes. I'm really not trying to pick on any individual. I'm going to pick on us most, but everyone kind of has the same problems because there's really not a way to do this perfectly. So we have things like what the hell is _index, what the hell is this trailing slash thing, and then Next you've got like the @ symbol, and that's a name slot. I'm sure it's cool, but what does that mean? I have to learn this thing. What is this, bracket, dot. Why do I have double parentheses with double periods in them? There's just a lot of convention you have to learn and understand and keep in your head to be able to use the file-based routing system. So you have to learn a convention. Second, code organization. Inevitably, your code organization is going to have some problem with it in file-based routing. It doesn't matter how you do it. People are going to complain. That is what I've learned in open source. And so this was our V1 routing. It's actually pretty straightforward. It really maps pretty nicely. So you've got like route / dashboard / calendar /1 would go to route / would go to dashboard calendar like $day, because that's like a dynamic one. So it makes sense. Like your route and your tree, your file tree looks very similar to what your URL paths look like. So that's really nice. But we had this problem where things like this _auth, that's actually the layout for this entire login, logout, sign up page system. So you have this kind of like separation of these two things, which was really annoying. So people started complaining about that. So Ryan came up with another convention, because that always makes people happy is when you change things on them. So we have this like flat route system where it actually like makes all the related things, all the concerns aren't separated anymore. They're all together, which is really nice. And Killaman, who's a really big part of the Remix community, created the Remix flat routes. People still use this. It was useful in V1, V2, and even in React Router, you can still use it. People love this because he was able to iterate and add more features that people want. But then, so it ended up looking a lot like this. So it kind of simplified that whole route structure. So code organization, we tried to solve that, but people still, there's still going to be complaints on how it works because you're going to get the EU factor. That's a big problem with file-based routing. We have these reactions of like, what the hell? Like coming from Next.js, the file naming for Remix is like so weird to me, which is fair. If you came from something else and you're looking at something new, it's probably going to be weird. When I look at this, I get the EU factor because I don't write Python today anymore. And maybe y'all think this is beautiful. I don't. Where are the brackets? It's very confusing to me. So familiarity bias is a real thing. Let's all just like hold on. If we initially have reaction to code, it's probably you, not the code. But it's weird, right? Egoist even pointed out, I cut off the likes accidentally, but 200,000 views of people kind of probably agreeing or resonating with, like, this is a little crazy. This is a little ugly, right? And Jacob pointed out something that doesn't justify this, but just rather points out the fact that any serious app is going to grow. No matter what your file-based routing system looks like, it's going to grow, and it's going to eventually be ugly and feel unmaintainable or big or whatever. That's just the reality. We can't really escape that. That's why file-based routing sucks, not why Remix's file-based routing sucks. So we could take a step back. We could go back to the V1 routing, or we could look at something like Next.js's routing. Is this better? I don't know. They've got a bunch of page.tsx. Some people like this. Some people don't. Some people get the EU factor. Some people love this. But finally, the last thing is you have to use your file names as an API. This, to me, is the number one reason. Again, that's why I put it at 4. The number one reason why file-based routing kind of sucks is because normally with a library, when you have a new API, what do? You make a new function. You export that function. It has JS docs and types and all this sort of stuff. With file-based routing, when you want a new API, you have to finagle the file system. You have to use whatever a file can allow, whatever symbols they'll allow, and you have to make up some convention for that API. So Next.js, pretty cool. It has some really, really cool features that Remix doesn't even have, like parallel routes and intercepted routes and all that kind of stuff. But then you have to create all these extra different things. You have the page, the loader, the error, you have the brackets like we talked about, you have the circle with the dot, and then the more like parentheses. So you have all these different conventions you have to build out instead of just like a function. So going back to the V2 routes that we had when we were working on React Router 7, we were kind of tired of this. We didn't want to make yet another convention because everyone was going to hate that. It didn't really matter what we did. But we wanted to take a step back and say, we're kind of trying to solve the wrong problem. We're trying to solve the wrong problem by coming up with the best file route system, file-based routing system. So instead, we kind of took this approach. We went back a step and we put it back in JavaScript because this is where your routing kind of should be. It should be this kind of config. So the way this works is this is just an array of a bunch of objects, and the layout, route, index, those are actually just little functions that just create a little object for you. If this seems weird, just think of JSX. It's the exact same thing. JSX is the syntax, right, that compiles down, or rather, executes down into creating these objects for you. So this is the exact same thing. And in my opinion, this is actually pretty easy to grok really quickly. Layout, route, maybe you have to learn a little bit of what those mean, and index, but it's very clear what those are and how the nested structure works. And now we don't have to have these magic names. We can name these whatever we want, which is really cool, right? And then we can even take the routes that we have, and we could say, okay, well, I want all the layouts to be in their own directory, so we can pull those up into their own directory. We can now make up our own convention, and the only people who can be mad at us are the other people working on this repo. So that's great. Ben Holmes, CEO of Whiteboard, saw this and rightfully thought this is really great. I really appreciate his praise. This was definitely like a really nice confirmation that we had done something pretty cool. This was his comment on a YouTube video that I don't even think it was about the file-based routing, but he was just like, wanted to make sure we knew, hey, you guys, you finally did it. You made routing simple. The answer wasn't pure config-based or pure file-based. It was somewhere in the code gen middle. We'll get to the code gen a little bit more. Yet still, we had people who said, why is this better? This seems less intuitive. This seems backwards. And in fact, why can't I just use the React Router file fs routes? That seems better. And now I'm basically having to mirror my files. I'm going to have to create them in your routes.ts file, and I have to create the file. I'm now doing duplicate work. Why in the world is this better? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about why this is better. So I've got this really dumb demo app that just has a bunch of navigations. There's not much else to it. And I want to talk about why this config base is better through a couple of examples. So the first is, if we go to like the login page, this is a 404 right now, so we don't have it set up. If we go and look at our auth routes, we can see that they're actually using that convention, the _ auth, blah, 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 blah. So that's our V2 routing convention. And so let's say, maybe the developers of the auth routes don't want to update, or they just haven't updated, or whatever. They just want to keep using that system. So how can we continue to use this system? So we can add a routes.ts file in here. We could call this whatever we want. and we're going to add some routes. And we just need to make sure that this satisfies a route config type. And then we're going to export this as default. And so in here, what we can do instead of this array, we'll just use the flat routes from React Router FS routes. And here we can give it a root directory. And with that root directory, we can give it, I believe it's going to be auth/routes. And so now, back in our main routes, we can just compose these things together. So we can import auth routes from auth/routes. And then now we can just spread these. And we do need to wait this because this actually returns a promise. You can return either a promise or just the routes themselves so that everything kind of composes nice, because you may be like fetching data to know what your routes are. And so now, if we refresh, that works. So we can use our file-based routing still. We don't have to get rid of that if we don't want to, or if a specific team wants the file-based routing, they can use it. And that FS routes, this could be anything. You could make this. You could make your own convention and publish it to NPM or whatever. Let's move the await down into here, though, just so it's not muddying up our main routes. OK, cool. So that's one thing that we can do. Let's take another example, though. All this dashboard stuff, this team, let's say, made their own like dashboard kind of module, and they've got all their directories, got their layouts and pages, and they have their own system that they kind of want to use. This happens a lot. Usually your repo is going to be organized kind of the way that your org is organized. This usually becomes a reflection of the two. So we're going to say, dashboard team, you can do whatever you want. Just give us a routes array, and we're just going to merge it in. But you can handle it however you want. So inside of dashboard, we're going to add routes.ts again. Again, you can name this whatever you want. I just like the convention of routes.ts is nice. And we're going to export a default. Again, it needs to satisfy that route config, and that's how we know we're all going to be good and everything's going to compose really well. And so in here, I'm just going to copy and paste the exact same thing, but this time it'll just be called dashboard. And here we're going to spread in these dashboard routes. And so let's go to a dashboard page just to make sure that I'm not cheating and this is all working correctly. So we're going to pull all of these out, save it. This should be a 404 now. It's not for some reason. There we go. All right. Cool. All right, so it's a 404. So in here, we're going to pass along everything that we just had. So let's pull in the route. But instead of actually pulling it from React Router dev routes, we can actually do something really nice. We can use a function called relative, and this will allow us to relatively create a route and an index and whatnot in this directory. So we're going to say let equals relative, and here we're going to pass in the directory that we're in, which is going to be app/dashboard. We're going to get it. There we go. And then we can pull out a route and an index here. And so these are going to be relative to that app/dashboard. So we can get rid of all the long file names that they had. So we'll take all of these, and we're going to change that to pages. And then the layouts ones will change to layouts. And then we can refresh and everything works, which is great. So we've simplified that. The dashboard team gets to do whatever they want to do. We get to do, we just get to merge everything into the routes.ts file, which is really nice. What else can we do? So I have this components page, and this is kind of like, you can think of it as like Storybook or whatever. These are a bunch of components I want to be able to show so people can see what components we have to work with. So inside of routes, I'm going to add this route. I'm going to say route. How many times can I say route in this talk? I'm going to say route components, and then we'll say I think it's components/page.tsx. And so now we can go to the component page. Let's see, components/page. I'm sure I did something wrong. Let's restart this thing. On which one am I missing an S? This guy? Oh, in the browser. Thank you. Woo! All right, we got it. Cool. So we got all our components. These are really beautiful components, right? But I've got a little bit of a problem. It's not a big problem, but if I run the production build, these components will also be on that, which I don't love. I don't really want the user to end up seeing these. Not a huge deal, but it'd be nice if we could kind of split this out and not ship this to production. Well, since we're just using JavaScript, what we can do is we can say if process.env.node.env equals development, then we can just say routes, which is our array up here, dot push, and we can just add this to that. And so now, if we reset the production build, this will be gone. And if we do the dev server, we still have our components page. So that's really nice. That's kind of hard to do with file-based routing. You have to create yet another convention to be able to do something like that. What else can we do? So let's say we want to add internationalization to this project. Ordinarily, with internationalization, you can use like something like at the front, like fr/whatever to be like French, and so you can use the URL to determine internationalization. And before, we would have to add like something like this, like lang, and these parentheses to say this is optional, but we don't want to do that because then we have to do it on every single route. So let's say we're going to start just by internationalizing these. So what we can do is we can pull out the prefix function, and here we can give it lang question mark. This just means it's a parameter, but it's optional. And then inside of that, we can just pass all of the routes that we want to be internationalized. So now if we go to the home page, and we're going to add a link, and we'll say we'll add that in a second. We're going to say go French mode. Let's go to the home page so we can see this, and we'll give a little bit of space. All right. And so now we can add a link to this. So we'll pull out the href that comes from React Router. And this actually is aware of all of the different routes that we have, which is really nice. So it already knows that, oh, hey, the about us and the contact all have this optional lang in front of it. So we're going to use the about us one. And so then we can pass in a lang. So we'll say French. And so now we're going to go French mode. We're going to go to French/about us. And then in the about us page, the params are already also type aware. So we can say if params.lang equals French, then we can return. That's the only French word I know. All right, cool. We have successfully internationalized our entire application. All right, what else can we do? We can do one more, well, we can do a lot of things, but we're going to do one more little thing. So now we're going to pull out this create CRUD util. So what this does is basically this is a function that is going to set up a bunch of routes for us, and it's going to make us have to set up all these different routes for like a CRUD application. So we're going to say something like users or user, and it'll pluralize it, and it'll do all this stuff. We'll kind of talk about it in a bit. But basically, now this is saying, hey, you need a user/layout. And if we actually go into the code, this little function is it's saying, hey, you need an edit, you need a destroy, you need a new. So if you're making a CRUD app, it might be nice to build like a little helper like this that makes sure you set up all the exact routes that you want. So this is really nice. I didn't actually come up with this. Sergio from the Remix community, who made like Remix Auth and Remix Utils and a bunch of things, he actually came up with this idea and said, hey, this is a really nice thing, a nice way that we can use this config-based routing to do so much more. And someone actually responded and was like, this is awesome. This reminds me of Laravel resource controller. Or Laravel folks in the crowd, they all avoid these talks, I figured. OK, cool. And Sergio even kind of said, yeah, that's great. I was actually inspired by Rails routes.rb. And you may be sitting on your hands right now looking at all this config stuff and be thinking, this does look kind of familiar. I didn't write this code. I don't know Rails. This is Cursor, so I'm sorry if this is wrong. But I know that we did take a lot of inspiration from Rails and how they have their routes.rb file to do their kind of config code-based routing, which is really cool. We've actually taken a lot of inspiration from Rails since the very, very beginning of Remix. It's really been inspired by Rails, so this is just like yet another version of that, which is really cool to me. So why you should use it? We've talked a lot about file-based routing. The benefit mainly being about we still need that file so we can do that code splitting. We've talked about a lot of why it sucks. And then I've tried to show you why I think, I kind of think we nailed it with this config-based routing. I think it's pretty cool. So why should you use file-based routing, though? I think it's still useful. I think a lot of people probably should use it. I think you should use it because it's easy to demo and get started with to build something quickly. It's a simple URL to route mapping. That's really nice. You get these conventions already decided in document. You don't have to make them all up. You don't have to have the dashboard team making up their conventions while you're making up your own. And you get that automatic code splitting. Now, an astute observer might realize that I've just repeated myself from the very beginning. We've gone full circle, and I've made no new points. When I shared this with Mark Daglish, who worked on the routes.ts feature, he said, this talk is really great, Brooks, but your ending kind of sucks, which is fair. And to that, I said file-based routing will always suck. And that's kind of my conclusion. It just kind of will. Like, if you're always going to be mad at it. If you hate it, that's not going to change. No one's ever going to fix it for you. Either get therapy or just be OK with it. I don't know. But it's a really, really bad reason to not like something. If you don't like Next.js because they're file-based routing, you need to find better reasons. If you hate our stuff because of file-based routing, there's plenty of other reasons to hate us. You can go find them, I promise you. So instead of just leaving it there, I will say that we can make it a little bit better. File-based routing will always suck without a good foundation. I believe that's what we built with routes.ts. So thank you.